Hi everybody, welcome to Sunday's Indycar. My name's Gordon Ross. Today I'm down in Partick on a beautiful sunny morning and just reflecting back on the events of the last 24 hours in Glasgow and the gigantic all under one banner march that took place yesterday. With such a large gathering of people, and even though I wasn't able to make it yesterday because I had a driving test to take, even though that was a problem for me, I could still monitor what was going on through social media, and I knew exactly what was going on because people kept sending me messages. But what is different about yesterday from the previous march which I attended last year, where there was 25,000 people, is the fact that there is not a general election going on this weekend, and therefore there are far more political activists available for this Saturday's event. That's one of the reasons why it was so huge. The other reason is that we've converted tens of thousands of new people to the cause, and many of those have come from all over Scotland to be at that march yesterday. Even people with disabilities, the elderly, people with families and pets struggled to travel into Glasgow to make it there on time for the march. The amount of people who attended the march and the rally depends on who you ask this question, but it's generally now accepted that the numbers attending the march and rally are somewhere in the region of 90 to 91,000 people. Now that is a phenomenal number of people to descend on a city on a Saturday morning and to march fully kitted out with flags, bagpipes, kilts, dogs, children and everything else through the heart of Glasgow. Along the way, as you'll probably know, you were met by about 20 hardline British nationalist supporters jeering and taunting the crowd with their Union Jacks. Now it was a very, very tiny counter-protest from the pro-UK side, and it struck me that when we looked at the media coverage this morning, for example, in the Sunday Herald shows a photograph where there are an equal number of Union Jacks and an equal number of saltires in the picture, which is a complete misrepresentation of the entire day, a visual misrepresentation deliberately by the sub-editors of the Sunday Herald to make it look as if there was an equal number of British nationalist supporters at that event. Now, those of you who follow the Scottish media on a regular basis know their tricks, and most of us who inhabit the online world and only get our news from online sources such as Indycar and Bella Caledonia and Wings Over Scotland, places like that, they know what is going on with the Scottish media, that it is playing tricks on the gullible people of Scotland who still sadly believe the lies that are and the misrepresentations that are printed in the newspapers every day. I don't think this is going to go away, incidentally. I think as the numbers of marchers increase exponentially over the next few months, the newspapers, all of them, I think, will start to really react against us. Now, it was very interesting yesterday that the BBC actually led on the story of the march and reported it relatively truthfully. So did Ruptly, which is the Russian news gathering service for RT, for Russia Today, and I believe STV also did some coverage as well. So they couldn't ignore us. Now that tells you something. It tells you that the British media has reached the limits of plausible deniability. They can no longer kid people on to the point where they don't notice that something's happening. They see 91,000 people marching through the biggest city. The newspapers and the television have got no choice now but to cover the story. They cannot just ignore it and pretend it's not happening, because then they are going to look really, really stupid to the people who still believe them. And I think this is the start of it now. We're beginning to reach a critical mass, a number of people which is so large that wherever we rally or wherever we march, as it grows larger and larger, the public can no longer have this hidden from them. The media cannot put the toothpaste back in the tube now. They can't put the genie back in the bottle anymore. It's so big. The independence movement has grown so large and is so highly visible all over the internet that normal, I say normal media in inverted commas, can no longer hide it. And that was the biggest achievement of the All Under One Banner rally yesterday, was to reach that critical mass for the first time since 2014. We have finally broken through, and we have unmasked the British nationalist media for what they are, which is a crowd of propagandists and the state media controlling what people are allowed to know. And this is where the people have now taken over. I mentioned last week what I thought we should call GRIP, which is the Grassroots Independence Party, or the Grassroots Independence People. We are now that GRIP. We've got that GRIP now. We've got a grip on the media. We've got them by the short and curlies, and they cannot ignore the movement any longer. Once you get this big, the sky is the limit. But as we know from yesterday, there were problems during the march. The police underestimated the numbers catastrophically, and at several points along the route, people were being asked to close up gaps. A lot of elderly people couldn't move as fast, or people with children and animals couldn't move fast enough to close up the gaps in the march. And so cars were trying to force their way through the march in very dangerous circumstances, and the police did nothing about it. The police should have been positioned on every single junction to prevent cars forcing their way through the march. It's highly dangerous. So the size of the march surprised everybody, including the police, who made the lame excuse about having to police an old firm game, a Rangers match somewhere or other. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but all of the people in a football match are inside a stadium. It doesn't require that many police to actually watch them. But when you've got members of the public out on the streets and amongst traffic with children, you need police there for safety purposes. So that needs to be fixed. But while I was thinking about this morning, it dawned on me actually that with the numbers climbing above or up to 100,000 or maybe more, the next step is another doubling of numbers. We're talking about 200,000 for the next big event. That poses problems for organisers who, to be fair to them, have worked absolute miracles, because all they've been given to work with is themselves, volunteers and social media. They don't have any other tools to work with. They've had to negotiate the route, they've had to organise it, insure it, train up the marshals, all the rest of that costs a lot of money. And I'm thinking maybe if these events are going to double in size, maybe if you're going to get hundreds of thousands of people on the streets before the independence referendum, then we need to think bigger. And what it dawned on me was that we have football stadiums in every single town and city in Scotland. If we're going to have these big numbers, why don't we hire these stadiums for one day in 5 or 6 different cities and towns and fill the entire stadiums for rallies and have speakers at each event? Those of you my age are old enough to remember things like Band Aid and Live Aid. Now, these were massive events, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people tuned in on media to watch them. We could do something similar with stadium events, I believe. And this is where I think the critical mass takes us next. It takes us off the streets, away from the traffic, and into big stadia. I'm talking about Wembley here. Not Wembley here, but Wembley-sized stadium. Let's say we went to Hampden for a Glasgow rally. It holds, I think, about 60,000 people, if I remember right. Might be more. There is also big stadium in Edinburgh. There's several big stadiums actually in Edinburgh, but I'm thinking of the rugby stadium over there. It's truly massive as well. Plus we've got Celtic Park. We have got other large stadia in Aberdeen, in Dundee, all over the place in fact. In every town and city in Scotland there are big stadiums. There's no reason why each independence or grassroots independence party group should not be able to organise a stadium event. And we could, I think, if we're good at this and we think carefully about how to do it, we could stage a nationwide series of one-day stadium events, all on the one day, that would take the independence fight to every town and city in Scotland on a single day. And no way could the media possibly avoid it. Can you imagine 4 or 5 stadiums with a capacity of say 50 or 60,000 full of people in all the towns and cities in Scotland? It would be a tremendous effort. But it's the only way I think we're really going to push the numbers and drive this forward so every person in every city sees the way things are going. People will always vote for the winners. When it comes to things like elections and campaigns of any kind, there are always a lot of people who sit on the fence who wait to see who is likely to win before they vote, and then they jump on the bandwagon and vote with that side. That's human nature. It's because some people are still remaining to be convinced all the way up to the last minute, and they will go with what seems to be the biggest, healthiest party or the biggest, healthiest part of the movement. And I think we now have the strength to put something like this together. I know a lot of the organisers of All Under One Banner have worked themselves to exhaustion over the last year to organise what happened in Glasgow yesterday. And if more of us were to step forwards and volunteer to organise similar events but in different towns and cities, I believe we could cover the whole of Scotland with one massive day of independence rallies, which nobody anywhere on the planet would be able to ignore. The media, I'm talking about the mainstream media, would be drowned out by the noise, and the police would easily be able to police such events because they would be contained in a place designed for large numbers of people. We have a PA system already built into the stadium so speakers can address the crowds. We can have guests, we can have music. A stadium event will attract tens of thousands of people, and many people would actually be prepared to pay a tenner or whatever the cost was of staging that event just so that we could do it. And I believe this is the way that Scotland can get the kinds of numbers we need on the streets to show both the SNP that it's time now for the referendum, and also to show the British nationalist parties in Scotland that their days are numbered now. That come March next year, British nationalist control over Scotland will be ended, and it will be time for Scotland to extract itself from the British Union and stand aside as an independent, individual, distinct country, not an enemy of England, not an enemy of the UK, but another partner, but no longer an unequal partner in an unequal forced union, but now a voluntary partner, an independent country with its own government, with its own taxation, with its own defence systems, no longer being forced to do anything by a foreign power. And that's how I see things going, and that's why I think the Independence March yesterday was a watershed event in the history of Scotland. A lot of people said they couldn't believe how jam-packed it was. I predicted we would get probably about 100,000. I think a lot of people thought I was over-egging it, but I knew right down deep that this is what's going to happen. The build-up has been gradual, but it's been constant. Every day I get new people wanting or making friend requests here. I have hundreds of friend requests queued up in my system at the moment I can't deal with, unfortunately. It's not because I don't want to, but I have already got too many. And more people phoning and contacting the show to say that they're now convinced, and they've been showing these videos to family and friends to explain to them that independence isn't about the SNP, it's not about separating ourselves from anybody, it's about taking back control of our country. And that is what we need to do. We're quite capable now of supporting ourselves. We've been independently supporting ourselves financially for 30 odd years. We run at a profit. We don't need England to subsidise us in any way at all. We have plenty of resources. We have healthy industries. And we have politicians who are more than capable of running this small country like this and making it absolutely bloom. So let's leave today on a happy note. Yesterday was a turning point. The next question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we double that, and how do we double it again? And I think we have to think bigger, and I think we have to think venues. Marches are difficult to police. Marches are difficult to get insurance and difficult to get stewards for. However, stadium events, completely different. If you hire a stadium, it's already an enclosed space. It has seating for everybody. There are toilet facilities for everybody. There's facilities for the disabled. There are loudspeakers, there's PA systems. There's plenty of space for everybody. And it's a controlled, safe environment for everybody to be in. And that, I think, is where we have to go next. Multi-stadium event on a single day has to be the next target. And that has to be done at the time of the Indy ref being called, because that's when people need to see us most, and that's when we have to be most visible, not just on social media but in the real world. The main media will try to minimise it, as they always do, because they're run by England, effectively, run by London firms. They'll try and minimise it. But if we put it in front of people's faces so they cannot ignore it and they cannot not see it, then that's how we win. We have broken through that third wall already. We've shown people that the media, the mainstream media, is not reality. It is a tiny, narrow view through a keyhole, which neglects all of the good things that the independence movement is doing and all of the good things that pro-independence campaigners have been pointing out for the last 4 years. Anyway, I've waffled on quite a long time, but the message today is, yesterday was a massive turning point. We have reached that critical mass, and now it's time to double it in the next event, and then double it again, and we keep doubling it until we have a majority behind independence, and that will not take long. Once the people see it, they've already started to see a preview of it yesterday. They now know that the independence movement is far bigger than the BBC and the STV have led them to believe, and it's much, much larger than any pro-British nationalist side in Glasgow could ever be. 91,000 people marched past 20 Union Jack waving idiots on the street. 91,000 against 20. That tells you everything you need to know about how people feel now about Scotland and what it needs to do. So, if you have any comments about these ideas I put forward today, contact me in the usual way. But I don't see any option now but to go much larger, and I think stadiums, as a health and safety professional at one time, I can see the stadium as being the best option for this. And I am sure there are plenty of events managers in stadiums and football clubs and rugby clubs all around the country who'd be delighted, would fall over themselves to have 40 or 50,000 fee-paying individuals come to their stadium to stage a massive event. Even if everybody had to pay a fiver, to fund this, I'm sure most of us would gladly do it. Anyway, I'm off. I'll see you later. But I'd like to say a fantastic well done to everybody involved in All Under One Banner. That was a truly epic day yesterday. I've never seen anything like that anywhere in Glasgow. I heard it said that that's the largest crowd of people in any demonstration since the demos against the Iraq War. Now that's way, way back in the 90s, is it? I can't remember. Was it 2003? Anyway, when Labour was taking us into that illegal war, the last time there were that number of people on the streets of Scotland, that's when it was. And that's how important it is. Anyway, I'll see you later. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the sunshine, and let's double this next time. Bye for now.